First of all, a very big thank you to Pip for suggesting that I put this presentation up before lunch, because I discovered it actually wasn't on my memory stick. All I had was this. So I've typed it up, the short form, so please excuse all the spelling mistakes and typos. So I'm Jo Coldwell Neilson from Deakin University. This lovely single word is Decoding Digital Literacy. That's my website, and so I've got some information up there, but it hasn't been updated for a while because life has been crazy. But it will be updated at some stage. So the title of my fellowship was Unlocking the Code to Digital Literacy, which I've translated to Decoding Digital Literacy. It's much easier than that long title. But basically the idea was to discover what our understanding of digital literacy should be in a higher education situation. So to develop a shared understanding of what digital literacy is, the plan was to develop a benchmark for students entering higher education around digital literacy, so they had some idea of what the expectations were. The initial plan also suggested that we need a digital solution to assist these people to self-assess their digital capabilities against the benchmark. That's problematic. And to clearly articulate a digital literacy graduate learning standard to meet and inform employer expectations. So that was what my fellowship was based on, and that's what I got the money for. That's not quite what I've ended up doing. But the whole point was to provide a sound basis for students to grow their digital capabilities, and for us as academics to be able to scaffold that learning in the curriculum. So what have I done? Well, I've done an extensive literature review, and bearing in mind that there are at least 300 publications every year coming out that's tagged digital literacy, it's absolutely ridiculous. That's a never-ending process. So I decided that I've got to cut my losses at some point and move on. I reviewed Australian university websites. I actually ended up just doing 13 Australian universities because it was taking so long. Reviewing what information they provided prospective students around digital literacy and the digital literacy expectations as they entered the institution. Obviously, this was done from their public websites, so it was very limited information. And of the 13 universities that I surveyed, only 2 universities gave any information whatsoever. And one of those universities that was about the hardware that they required to gain access to their facilities. And what was really interesting was, bearing in mind this was in 2000 and got the fellowship in 2017, they were talking about having a device that had a DVD reader. And it was so out of date it was ridiculous. But anyway. I've also conducted a nationwide survey of Australian academics. That was actually quite disappointing in the response rate. I only actually got 450 responses, despite going through all of you guys and a whole heap of other networks that I belonged to and everybody that I knew. But it did, I did get responses from about 25 universities, I think, across most of the discipline areas that you could expect in a university. So I think it's pretty representative, but I couldn't draw any significant outcomes from it, but I've got some really great data coming out of it. I've conducted focus groups in several universities which have been really informative. The focus groups have been with participants at all the different levels of the university, and that was a really interesting insight into how different universities approached the whole concept of digital literacy. And the latest thing that this is a momentary insight, just as I was dropping off to sleep one night. Students go for help around IT issues to the help desk. So what if I could get hold of the incident reports to see what it is they're seeking help on? And so I have got 6 months' worth of incident reports from Deakin University Help Desk. There are some really big number I think it was 36,000 incidents were reported. Interestingly, the majority of them was around connecting to the Wi-Fi. But there's a whole heap of other stuff there as well, which we're currently analysing. So that's what I've actually done. I have developed a digital literacy understanding. I don't like to call it a definition because it kind of gives it more import than it really should have. But this is just a way of talking about digital literacy. It's been developed from a number of sources, mostly the work that has been done in the UK by JISC, in Ireland, all aboard. Belshaw's work, was his PhD around digital literacy, and he talks about the 8 C's of digital literacy. And so this is a kind of an amalgam of all of that thinking and a lot more, plus my own. I'll come back. And I just think this is quite a neat understanding because it's technology independent, and hopefully it will have some longevity, and it's something that we can start talking about and everybody kind of understands what it's all about. And the key words here is non-technologists balk at the fact that I start this understanding with using technology. Because, for example, for a lot of social scientists, it's about the social aspects, the communication, and so on. And what I say to them is, if we didn't have these devices, we wouldn't have this problem. And you've got to be able to use the device to some extent in order to be able to gain those benefits that they're talking about. That's why I start with technology. But you've got to be able to use it confidently, creatively, and critically. It doesn't say anything about using it expertly. And that's the key here. None of us will ever be experts at any of this. It just, there's too much of it, and it changes too frequently. But we should have sufficient skills, capabilities, and knowledge that we are confident about going into situations and being able to use the technology the way that we want to. And it's not just in a learning environment, it's throughout our lives, and particularly for our students. From the moment they wake up to long after they go to sleep, they're using technology. They're on their phones. Oh, and by the way, who's got their smartphone? Hold your smartphone up. What is that? What is that device? Well, we call them smartphones. It is my considered opinion that we should drop the word phone completely. Call it a computer with a phone application. Because that's what they are now. They're not phones. No, we use them for everything else but making a phone call, basically. So, but yes, it's all about how we use technology in our lives to support our learning, to support our work. And we are in a digital society, and we're moving into a more digitally enhanced environment. And it's going to become a limb. So we've got to be able to use it like that. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, one of the examples that I often use is digital literacy is different for different people. Okay? So if I'm talking to a student, it's about using social media, it should be about supporting their learning, it should be able to do all of this stuff to be able to innovate. If I'm talking about my grandmother, then or actually my mother, then she needs to be able to have sufficient digital literacy to maybe do her banking, do her shopping, and talk to her grandkids overseas. That's it. So that's digital literacy for her. So it has to be contextualised. So that's that kind of motherhood statement. Underlying that is a framework. And this is where it starts getting interesting. So in order to be digitally literate, you have to have a whole heap of different skills. And those skills are changing as the technologies change. First of all, you need to have some level of, whoops, wrong one, sorry, gone to the end, come back, that's it. So you need some sort of ICT proficiency. And in some models, you see it as the centre of a flower. It's actually not the centre, it's the sort of base, and the flower is growing from it. This is just one skill that you have to support all the other skills. Information and media literacy is really important, and at the moment, digital literacy within universities is often information literacy. It's grown out of the library. And I don't want to discount information literacy, it's really, really important. Media literacy is almost more important these days, but it is just one of the set of skills that you need. Digital identity and well-being is growing in importance. Our younger generation don't seem to appreciate yet the importance of their digital identity. What they are putting online, their digital footprint, is going to live with them forever if they're not careful, and it's going to impact on the way that people perceive them. So that part isn't very well understood yet. And the whole well-being. I mean, I noticed that my iPad now is telling me how many hours on average a day I'm sitting on the iPad. But I can imagine that some of our younger colleagues and younger students, that number would be quite high. And that is of concern. And that has to be managed. The amount of information and data that we are receiving and in learning and research, the amount of stuff that we have to manage and curate is enormous. And so we need to be able to manage that whole process. We need strategies to manage that whole process. How many people use EndNote or something similar? Yeah? It was interesting in the academic survey that not many people in that survey actually said that they did that. So I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, communication, collaboration and participation, I mean, for us as educators, that's a given. Creation and innovation as well. It would be really good if our students were creators rather than consumers. Get them to understand what it is to contribute in the online environment. And of course, security and privacy is a growing concern and will continue to be a growing concern as technologies change and the threats change as well. So in order to be digitally literate, you need to have some combination of skills from all of these different sets. And what I would like us to be thinking about is how are we developing our students as digital citizens? How are they going to operate in the digital world? And that's going to be really important. And one of the things that I'd love to do with this image is get one of my students to do an animation. So we start with the two-dimensional version, and then it morphs, goes round in a circle, to a human being. But that morphing is continuous, because this isn't a one-off exercise. This is something that is a lifelong exercise. Being digitally literate in this day and age is all about lifelong learning. So that effectively is the first goal of the fellowship. What about the other ones? And these should actually be numbered 2, 3 and 4. Didn't get that far over lunch. So the benchmark for digital literacy assumed knowledge. Well, this is going to come out of the work that I'm doing with the incident reports, because if we can identify what are the things that students are having most difficulty with, then we can start putting those resources up front rather than them going to the help desk and having to try and sort these things out. Basic skills for higher education entrance. I presented a paper on Monday at Ascolite which gives some ideas of what academics are expecting from their students and what they are actually observing. And can I tell you, we are expecting this and observing this. It's shocking. The worrying thing is that we're observing this at first year, we're expecting this at first year, observing this in first year units. That doesn't change over the years. Yeah? Slight variations. It could be that actually our expectations are going up and observations are not matching that. Number of reasons. But the fact is, if you are trying to get our students, to be digitally literate by the time they graduate, we're not doing it. It doesn't matter, what's happening here. they're still wide apart. So if we had some understanding of what those basic skills might be, and they're pretty low level, email, word processing, I think that's about it from the Escalite paper, then at least you have a benchmark that you can say, okay, we expect our students to do this. We'll say this, but we'll do this. So then you have somewhere to start building and scaffolding from. Students understand, academics understand, course teams can start building and scaffolding through to a digital citizen at the end of the degree. A digital solution to assist individuals, I think that's pointless. All you have to do is go to Dr. Google, TEDx, Khan Academy, but the point is we need to point the students there. There's a lot of resources out there, but we need to have some way of pointing students in the right direction. One of the scariest things that happened to me this year was I asked students to use track changes in their assessment because it was a repeat of an assessment they had done last year, and we wanted to see the changes. The number of students, and these are third-year IT students, who said, I didn't do it because I didn't know what it was. And yet in the rubric, if you don't use it, you get no marks. And the other one was, well, it looked messy, so I took it out. I think, what's going on here? Anyway, so a clearly articulated digital literacy graduate learning standard. Well, we don't know what the entry is, so how can we define a standard? And this is to meet employer expectations, and employers have no more idea than we do. So let's keep this simple. One of the things about digital literacy is that it has to be contextualized. Digital literacy for an IT person is going to be very different from digital literacy for a journalist. It is going to be very different from digital literacy for a tradie. For example, there's some base skills that you need, but all the stuff around it, it's like somebody, Keith, I think you mentioned about talking, no, it was Maura, talking about 2.5 languages. Yeah? Well, digital literacy is one of those languages that we need to get students to start thinking about. And it has to be contextualised in the discipline, therefore it needs to be addressed by the universities themselves. We can give them a framework to do it, and it'll be based on the digital citizen framework, but disciplines have to decide how they interpret that within the context of their discipline. So this will all come down to having a framework. Where am I? How many minutes? 2 more? Okay. So what do I plan to do to complete this work? Obviously articulate outcomes for goals 2 and 3. Develop a framework to scaffold digital literacy through the curriculum, and that work is actually underway within Deakin. I'm working with the library to articulate digital literacy outcomes based on my framework, on my model. We've done it for AQF level 7, and we're about to do AQF level 9 to get some understanding of what the skills are that we need. I'd love to organise a roadshow to present this work more widely. Well, that depends on funding, of course. I've got to write the fellowship report. I don't know when that's going to happen. Complete papers under development. There are at least 3 of those that have started and not finished. And there are at least 3 others that I've got in my head that need to be written. So, and this is what I was talking about, report by publication, because I've got 3 papers already, plus a whole heap of other stuff. Those are the publications. I didn't get around to typing them all up, but if you're interested, they're here. And they are on my website. But I've been focusing on conferences just to get the information out there quickly. So thank you very much.